Hey everybody, this is Shirlene with Cheryl's Crafty World, and today we are coming with Book Club Life Interrupted by Priscilla Shirer. I'm going to be going over chapter 5, and then there will be another video covering chapter 6. I'm sorry I wasn't able to do a live, but I have been ill for the last week. No, it is not COVID, but I have been sick. I don't know if I have a flu bug or if it's something else going on. I suspect it is something else going on that I've been dealing with since I was diagnosed as a teenager, and it may be time to have the final surgery, which would put me in menopause right away. But I'm not having any more kids no time soon, not in this lifetime, so might as well go ahead and have it and get it over with. Um, I've put it off for a while when the doctor had suggested, um, because we didn't want poor Mr. Bob to have to deal with me. But now that I'm in my 50s and I'm probably good, I'm just going to go ahead and get that taken care of. So, right now we are doing chapter 5. And if you have the book, I hope you're reading it because I have been getting. This is my second time doing this book club, and I have been getting such good nuggets of wisdom from it, and I hope you are too. So let's open up to chapter 5. Okay. Alright, so chapter 5 says the slippery slope. It comes from Jonah 1 and 3. It says, so he went down to Joppa, found a ship which was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, and went down into it with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Excuse me. Just means that Jonah was planning his escape from God because he didn't want to go to Nineveh. It says it wasn't this bad in the beginning. You know, sometimes we think about escaping things that God has asked us to do, and we think, oh, it's not going to be so bad, but we don't realize that you really can't run from God. In the end, you will end up doing what you're supposed to do, even if it takes you the long way around. She says, I think all of us can relate to that. As a kid, whenever I was caught in a bit of disobedience, I always had a tendency to try and lie my way out of trouble. It seemed like a shortcut to safety, an easy way to avoid punishment. Making up a story usually covered me for a while, maybe long enough to get away with it completely, but almost without fail, don't we all know, one lie leads to another. A second lie must be played with a third. Each one I told always positioned me on a steeper, more slippery slope, closer to the edge, forcing me to be ever more meticulous about what I said next, and how it squandered with what I said before, how it squared up with what I said before. How much simpler it would have been if I had just told the truth from the start. There was really no good way now for this to end. No way except down. And that is so true when we're running from God, or we try to lie to God, or lie to ourselves, because you can't lie to God, but we lie to ourselves about why we're doing what we're doing. We may lie to others to make them think we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you have to keep saying another lie and another lie, and before you know it, you're circling the drain and you don't even know what's up and what's down anymore. Okay? It says, but that comes with running. When we run from God, we find so many reasons to run. It starts with a few steps, picks up speed, and before we know it, we're like a certain prophet of God I know who woke up one stormy day acting like anything but a prophet. And that's so true. Um, when you're running from God because you don't want to do what He told you to do, it becomes a slippery slope. You're just wondering what's next, and trying to fix stuff on the way down. It says the second Jonah determined God's call to Nineveh was not up his alley, meaning he wasn't feeling it. The moment he decided God's word wasn't something he was necessarily required to obey, he essentially resigned his position as a prophet. No one who legitimately claims to speak for God can fail to listen to God. Jonah was stepping down from office. It says he went to Joppa, and Joppa was one of the major ports in the ancient Near East. Assuming he went there from Jerusalem, it meant a journey of about 30 miles, descending from the mountainous terrain of Israel's inland regions. It was a downhill run. He found a ship that was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, and went into it, stepping off dry land. All right. Make sure I got the right page here. Sorry. So Jonah, he bought himself a ticket on a boat that was headed to Tarshish, which was the farthest he could get away from Nineveh, because he didn't want to go because God wanted him to go. Jonah had gone below into the hold of the ship. So once he bought his ticket, he went down into the ship to pretty much hide. Pretty much hide. Everybody else is up on the deck, taking in the sea and stuff, and he was like, "Yo, I'm gonna go down and take me a nap, cause maybe I could sleep this away. Maybe this is just a bad dream." Okay, down, down, always down. Eventually down to the bottom of the sea, into the belly of the big fish. His decision to run from God's command, to escape God's manifest presence, spun a web of disaster from which he couldn't be freed. Before he knew it, his circumstances had gained an unstoppable momentum, taken on a life of its own. Soon he was in the teeth of a ferocious storm, and had been fingered by sailors as the likeliest cause of this fury, and then was hurled into the lightning-charged waters, apparently down for the count. So these men, they realized, a storm had come while they were on this boat headed to Tarshish, and it was such a storm that they were worried about the boat breaking. And back then they all had their own gods that they prayed to or whatever, so they all began to call out to whatever they believed in or whoever they believed in. And they realized, we got this dude downstairs sleeping, like, why is he up here calling on his God to help us? And then when they found out that he was the one true God, he was probably, most likely, by common denominator, the problem. And so they went forth and did what they thought was best, which eventually they tossed him. And aren't we like that? Sometimes if things don't fit into our situation, we toss them, whether it's things or people. We got to be careful of that, because of storms or divine interventions that happen in our lives are often to draw others to Christ as well. So if we give up and we throw out the opportunity, those people don't get to find Christ either. Something to think about. You surely know the story. First, as mentioned, he opted out of the responsibility so he could hang back home at the palace. Then she's talking about David. Okay. So she talks to give an example of how when you tell one lie and things can snowball before you know it. She talks about King David. And if you don't know the biblical story about King David, he didn't want to be in the war, so he sent someone in his place. And then while he was up on the roof of his house, he laid eyes on this beautiful woman who was taking a bath. So let's see what happened. It says, surely you know the story. First, as mentioned, he opted out of the responsibility so he could hang back home at the palace. Then, while perhaps innocently enough, taking a late night stroll around his rooftop during a bout of wakefulness, he spied a beautiful woman taking a bath in some nearby location down below. Talk about an explosive combination. A moonlit night, an undressed woman, a lovely man of power, influence, and persuasion. All the elements were in place for a fall from grace. Okay? So we know that David ended up getting with this woman. It says from there, those first factual decisions led to desperate cover up, a senseless murder, the ordeal of watching his illegitimate son's death, a lifelong loss of trust and relationship with his children, and almost most importantly, the displeasure of God. The thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. 2 Samuel 11:27. Let me tell you what he did. He got with old girl, all right? And she had a husband. Okay, so her husband was in the service. And their affair got her pregnant. So to cover it up, David had her husband put on the front lines and he was ultimately killed. So this was how David was going to cover up his mess. Okay? He was covering up for others, but God already knew. It says the thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord, 2 Samuel 11:27. So you see how one lie led to another lie, led to a murder? Ridiculous. Now maybe our situation might not be that dramatic, but lies have a way of becoming uncovered, and they have a way of affecting more than just us. Okay? Because now he's having this child the wrong way after he done cheated with this man's wife. And he had the power and the influence. Now, I'm not saying she couldn't have said no. But at the same time, this was King David. Okay? It says one bad decision can take a person down. And that is so true. Sometimes we get caught up. And God knows that. We live in a very dark world. And we sitting back watching the evil ones live the high life. They're the millionaires and, living this carefree life and not having to be responsible by the word of the Lord. But it's all going to come to a point one day where they're going to have to make a decision. Okay, and sometimes we make bad decisions that take us to bad places. She talks about how she went to the University of Houston and she developed a relationship with a young man who wasn't a Christian. Now, for those of you that may not know, Priscilla is a PK. She's a preacher's kid, okay? So she know right from wrong. She know the way, all right? And she hooked up with this guy because she had feelings for him, even though he wasn't a Christian. All right, so that right there tells you that there's going to be conflict because he's going to want to do things that she shouldn't be doing. And is she going to be caught up in that? Well, she talks about one night that she was with him. She says, how clearly I remember the night we were out on a date and ended up at one of his friends' houses. Even as our front tires wheeled into the driveway, I knew I was in the wrong place. Cars were lined up everywhere. All the sights and sound of a raucous off-campus college party were evident with one glance. Empty beer cans and liquor bottles were scattered on the lawn, loud music blaring from the windows, and the stench of drugs in the air. He grabbed my hand and led me in. Surely there's a difference in appearance between a genuinely happy smile and a plastic grin I painted on myself as he introduced me around. Easy from the first decision to enter into the relationship with a guy who didn't value my belief system, who didn't understand what I was really all about. First decisions, acceptable compromises. Alright, lazy judgment calls that don't feel like any big deal at the time. Rejection of Christ's lordship in areas that seem like only minor disobediences. Minor disobediences lead into big disobediences. The Bible says it's better to be obedient than to sacrifice. It really does. The decisions we're making today will impact your tomorrow. The way you respond to the interruptions you're facing right now will have a bearing on the direction your life takes next. A year from now, a decade from now, a generation from now, you'll know whether or not you've walked with God in a faithful, trusting manner, or whether you left yourself wide open to doubt and bitterness and all the biting regrets of picking and choosing your obedience options. And that's what's so good about God. He gives you options. He's a gentleman. I tell everybody, God is a gentleman. He lets you have free will. He lets you have free choice. Either you gonna follow him or you gonna not. It's just is what it is. You got some that follow him on Sunday and they reckless Monday through Saturday. And you got some that actually live the life 24/7. And God sees this and rewards their obedience. The next section says hard to see. I'm willing to bet you know that I'm talking about. In fact, it may be fairly likely that you're reading the words today from somewhere far down the slippery slope. And because of our enemy loves seeing you there, he's tried everything he knows to keep you from realizing who you are, to make this free fall feel somewhat enjoyable, like you've gotten away with something. You're none of the worse for it. And that's so true. We get hugged up with the enemy and he'll take you so far down, but he'll make you think that it's a nice ride. Kind of like riding a roller coaster. You're going up and up, and then you make this decision, and next thing you know, you're going down, and you got these crazy curves that you didn't see coming, but you're supposed to be still throwing your hands in the air and screaming and having a good time. Alright? Sin and guilt have a way of affecting you physically. And that is so true. Alright? Sin and guilt can affect you mentally, emotionally, and physically. So sometimes I used to sleep almost like a drug. I use sleep almost like a drug to make pain and worry go away, hoping things will be better in the morning. Depressed? He may have been so resigned to his fate, he quit caring about others, thought of what was going to happen to him next, justified. So Jonah, he just wasn't thinking about what was going to happen to him or others. He just knew he didn't want to go to Nineveh. And he made the decision to buy that ticket to get on the boat and to run. Alright? He was a refuge. Someone has written it. The hardening of a tender heart almost always starts with a justifiable action. We think we know what we're doing. We consider our resistance toward God's plans, our lack of surrender to be minor compared to that others have done. And then that's how we get in trouble. Comparing ourselves to others, because we all have our own journey, and what might be okay for someone else might not be okay for you. It might be okay, and this is just a hypothetical, it might be okay for you to tell your child that you're going to come see them for the holidays and you don't show up. But it's not okay for the pastor to say he'll see you next Sunday and he don't show up. We can't compare ourselves. We all have a God to answer to. And we all have our paths, our journeys that we have to walk. So, first off, don't compare yourself to nobody. And the second freedom that you can give yourself, stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. Unless they pay your bills or feed you, or they your God, don't worry about what everybody else thinks, because we all got opinions. We think we know what we're doing. We consider our resistance toward God's plans and our lack of surrender to be minor compared to that what others have done. We figure we do a lot of good things that ought to make up for our admitted weaknesses here and there in one or two areas. We don't think God expects us to be so radical and on guard all the time. We still got a life, right? And perhaps Jonah was feeling this way while he was trying to run from God by taking this boat trip, by lying about who he was and trying to run from God. It says, there's nothing pretty about the slippery slope of sin, disobedience, and resistance to God. Nothing nice comes from running. Nothing sweet about the sleep of the spiritually seduced. The path downward possesses a gravity that becomes harder and harder to counteract, and lower you plunge. So don't get caught up in things that you're going through in life and that you want to run. I mean, it is so easy, so easy to say, I'm not going to do this. Even if God has called me to do, I'm not going to do this. That's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do. Right? The next section says going up. And she talks about her friend Holly, who serves as in a Christian center. But Holly wasn't always doing that. Holly was on point to be this actress that made all this money. She was getting different parts in different shows and things like that. And then God called her one day and said, I don't want you to do that anymore. And she wasn't happy about it, but she listened to God. Okay? And then, of course, the enemy had to come back and, um, he had to offer her more. So her agent called her. It says Holly had read a part in another TV series, working from a partial script that didn't reveal in complete detail the direction this character would be taking or what exactly this show would be about. But when she asked for and took home the full script to review, she soon realized this was another questionable role she didn't want any piece of. She phoned her agent and told him she couldn't do it. But Holly, I just got a call back for you on this audition. It's down to you and just a couple of others. Doesn't matter, she said. I'm not doing it. And what it was is Holly didn't want to do acting parts that were against her spirit, against being a Christian. In other words, she wasn't trying to get out there and play an evil villain or a prostitute, or not even a prostitute, just like somebody that sleeps around, a home wrecker, that kind of stuff. She didn't want any roles that would go against her Holy Spirit. And her agent, he's looking at the dollar sign. He ain't thinking about what she wants. Okay? This is against his wants and wishes and personal earning potential. Holly's talent rep dutifully made the call to the production company and apologized for his client's misgivings. Back and forth this went. They really wanted her. She really wasn't budging, and yet the offer was now only repeatedly extended but was ultimately doubled. Okay, so now they want to give her double the money. We're talking big bucks. Her agent was starting to think her little holdout strategy was brilliant, but Holly wasn't holding out. What she was really doing was telling this man, no, I won't do this. It's not worth it's not worth my salvation. It says, didn't she know how many Bibles she could buy and ship to China with the money she'd be making? Despite all this, she made a decision, a first decision, and she was sticking with it. Despite all sorts of reasons and rationales, she was not going to let this take her down. She was rolling with God's intervention, even if at times she felt like she might be making a mistake. Today, she spends her time talking about Jesus with women all over the country. She has a long, un-Hollywood-like marriage as well and two precious children. Even if the occasional wonder if questions may pop up, she doesn't regret one bit her decision to yield to the interruption, to take God up on his divine intervention. She feels that there's no comparison to what she's doing today, fully engaging in ministry to women, serving the church alongside her husband, spiritually investing in the lives of others, okay, and other actors who have walked a similar road. That comes anywhere close to what television acting could have done for her. Yes, she's taken a personal stand of obedience to God's calling. When life offered down, Holly chose up. Where have we heard that before? When they go low, we go high. And if you guys don't know who said that, that was Michelle Obama. Down is always available. Easy to get to, but never easy to get out of. Especially when, like Jonah, you're too knotted up within yourself to notice when you've drifted off to sleep and don't realize the depth to which you have fallen. And so that was chapter 5 about the slippery slope. So what I would say to you from that chapter is be careful with your decisions. And if God is calling you or speaking to you, listen to him. Save yourself the trouble of doing it the hard way. Because guess what? God's going to get his way one way or another. And if he can't work through you, if he can no longer work through you, he'll find somebody else to do it. Because souls need to be saved. People need to know about Jesus so that they're not suffering in the darkness of this world. Alright, I hope this chapter has helped you. If you've gotten anything out of it, let me know down in the comments. And we'll see you over in chapter 6. Bye for now. Be blessed and be safe. And listen for God's voice.